All right, welcome folks to the inaugural episode of the Krehbiel podcast. Today we have a very close friend of mine on as our inaugural guest, Mr. Jonathan Huml. He is a master's student here at Harvard University. Yes, the Harvard University. Tell us what you're studying, just to give us some background.
Hey, well, first off, Eric, thanks for coming on to my podcast. It's great to have you on in my studio, my equipment, working with my people, my folks. You guys can introduce yourselves later on camera, but the name is Jon Huml, as Eric said. For the five of you listening, I'm a grad student here at Harvard. I'm in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. I just completed my undergraduate studies in mathematics and statistics at UNC Chapel Hill. And I'm looking forward to getting down today, talking about some serious stuff.
We will indeed get down. That's what we came here to do. So, let's kick it off. Let's kick it off on a serious note, though. Okay, just to give people something to get warmed up with. Can you just kind of explain, what you're working on, what you do up here, what kind of crazy futuristic technologies you're a part of up here? Sure.
So obviously, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in Cambridge, not just at Harvard, but at MIT too. As a master's student, I think you're expected a little bit more to focus on coursework as opposed to research. My long-term goals are more on the PhD side. So I'm using this as an opportunity to explore what research avenues I might want to, spend 4 or 5 years of my life on, or more,
Right.
Coursework, or actually, I'll stick to research for now because I think it's a little more interesting, at least to me.
Right.
On the one side, so I do compressive sensing and sparse coding problems. So this is more like electrical engineering. It's a little bit outside of it's a little bit more about machine learning theory, right? So for a lot of these models, they work very well, and you probably you've definitely interacted with them in some capacity on, pretty much every big platform nowadays uses machine learning in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
It works very well, but we don't always know why.
Right.
So we have to kind of go back and ask ourselves why these things work, and because we kind of owe it to ourselves, right? If they're going to be making important decisions in medicine or autonomous vehicles, content creation is a kind of a low-stakes game. But even then, we've seen the perils of poor content curation.
Right.
With all the, we all know. I don't have to go into detail.
Yeah, we're not gonna name names, but
Yeah, you know who you are.
Yeah.
Facebook. Anyway, again, I'm not gonna name names, but
Right.
no. But this stuff matters, right? If it's gonna be used in practice, we have to have guarantees on how good or how bad it is.
Exactly, and it's so many people are consuming so much through those means now too that it's only gonna become more and more important over time.
Exactly, and some of the labs that I've been working with, they're using it for very sensitive data, right? Like in vitro fertilization or surgery or diagnostics, things that if you get it wrong you could kill someone.
Right.
So it's really important that obviously you got to get it right, but you also got to, it's not just enough to say, if I tell a doctor do this, it's like, well, they want to know why I did it.
Right.
So interpretability is a huge thing, and I worked a little bit on that last semester. Personally, it's not like a huge or like a deep interest of mine. I would say it's more like a something I like to think about, but it's not something I would want to really delve into. But it's important. It's like I respect the people who do that. We need that.
Oh yeah.
So I won't bore you with the details on like sparse coding and compressive sensing. I think it's interesting, but like at a higher level, it's not even really about that, right? It's more like deep learning and unsupervised learning. Right now, what I'm working on specifically, what I think I'll write my thesis on, is closer to. So there's a new kind of branch of machine learning today called self-supervised learning.
Right.
So it's like it's claimed to be a fundamentally different paradigm than unsupervised or supervised. So, supervised, right, you have a target class that you want to shoot for, or like a target label or something.
Right.
Unsupervised is more exploratory, so I don't have any labels. I'm just kind of, you can think about it like an oracle, right? So I give the oracle some data, and the oracle tells me, this is some interesting stuff that I found.
Right, like here are some connections between some data points.
Yeah.
Right.
Basically, at a high level, yeah. Self-supervised is basically like trying to make connections between things. So it's a little difficult to explain without math, but
right.
Like at a high level, basically what I'm doing is like non-contrastive self-supervised learning. So in this case, you basically have like positive pairs. So you have like a picture of a cat, right? And then you do something to the cat. So maybe you rotate it, or you put some blur or some filter on it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the idea is that if I have some picture or some piece of data, it should be relatively invariant for me to compute whatever properties of that data under like a little bit of noise, like not a ton,
right.
but if I keep its like essence, whatever that essence is, I should still be able to recognize it as a cat. And you can see this as a human, right? If I turn a book upside down, you can still kind of read it. It's like it's not easy, but you can still see it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think the analogy you made yesterday, or the point you made that kind of this sparse coding approach that you're working on relates to, or is influenced by like the biological functions of how we process information, especially visually, like how we kind of intentionally forget a lot of the data that we ingest.
Exactly. The gist of that point was basically, so the models that we work with today, right, are very like low resolution images. Not like images. I'm saying like snapshots of how reality works.
Right.
It's like obviously you can have like really good quality pictures. I maybe use a bad choice of words, but what I'm saying is like, as a human, right, obviously I'm not seeing like a million pictures like you would be training some deep learning model on. Actually, I'm kind of even getting more than that, right? I'm getting a constant stream of video feed, audio feed, tactile, sensory feed. I'm getting some internal signals too, hunger, thirst, all that stuff.
Right.
So there's a lot of data coming in, and you can't make sense of all of it. It would be overwhelming. So you ignore a lot of it. Right. Like if you live next to a train station, you know what I'm talking about. Like the first week you're there, you can't sleep, and then you don't even notice it. Maybe somebody points it out to you. It's like, wow, this is loud. It's like, oh yeah, I guess it is.
Right.
But
your brain kind of normalizes to it, and it says, okay, this information is not really relevant or important, so it kind of intentionally discards it after a while.
Exactly, and that's the central question of what we're doing. It's like, what is the essence of something? But the essence of something also depends on the context, right? So we're kind of figuring out, like in the lab, like what properties, like this would be like more geometric, the way we think, because obviously we can't. There's a lot of information, we don't understand about how the human brain works. But what properties do you want to preserve under different questions? So, you have to think about what the questions are, but it's not always clear. But it's food for thought. So,
right. So what type of data are you really working on in your research then? Like, is it? I know we talked briefly about music a couple months ago, but I'm not sure if that's kind of what you've been playing with.
Yeah. So that was more just messing around.
Right.
That's a whole different ball game. That was more like separating tracks.
Right.
By source. So like an inverse problem. So here, like, it was more like images. At the moment, though, like, when you're just starting out, you really want to start with just really simple data sets, right? You want to be able to, even just something you make up, right? You just want to make sure that your model can recover whatever it is you come up with. So simple is better in the early stages.
So could it, in theory, like, could you start with something as simple as, like, literally an 8-bit image or something?
I'm talking even more simple than that. Like,
oh, wow.
Like MNIST is like the digits data set that like everybody uses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many citations it has, but it's several thousand, right?
Right.
Well, it's more than that, but I'm talking like 2D data, like two little clusters, like maybe you have like the data set like I work with in my little toy experiments on the side now.
Mm-hmm.
It's called like the moon's data set. So there's like a half moon up top and then a half moon on the bottom, and you want to like cluster those basically. So
interesting.
Anything you can visualize is very good. MNIST is, images are high dimensional, right? Like if you vectorize an image, I think MNIST is what? Is it 16? Maybe it's 24 by 24, but even then, that's like moons is 2D.
Right.
MNIST is 24 by 20 or 16 by or whatever it is. I don't remember the exact dimensions.
Right.
So you want something you can visualize and really hammer down to a science.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So, where do you see that sort of research for yourself kind of leading somewhere long term, or is it more just like I was into this, or I kind of caught this bug and now this is what I'm working on for the moment?
Yeah. So no, I mean I enjoy this stuff a lot. As I said earlier, my background is in math, so this kind of really at a high level we want to tie this back to function approximation. So as far as coding is. Your work, like the models that we work with, work in like linear subspaces.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, I mean, obviously neural networks are like inherently nonlinear.
Right.
But so it scratches my mathematical itch because you can make it about as rigorous as you want.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have problems with that. Some people are like, like there's this thing called the neural tangent kernel that works with like an infinitely wide neural network.
Right.
And some of the criticism of that is like, okay, well, obviously I can't have an infinite number of neurons on a computer. I don't know. As a mathematician, being too abstract doesn't really bother me.
Right.
So.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting point about math, kind of being able to go into even more abstract territory than like, programming or computer science or computational science.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself going for a PhD more in the math side of things, or more kind of segueing into something more concretely in the computer science field?
Yeah, it's I mean, not to give a non-answer, but I think I would like to have both.
Right.
I mean, I've done the math thing, right? I mean, maybe not at a high level, but I'm definitely not a research scientist in terms of math. I think most people that go on, or even most people that stop after undergraduate in math, I think they'll agree that this is like the absolute basics.
Right.
If anything, it really kind of shows you how little you know about math.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So it's, how many more years of math could I be doing and still be learning new stuff? I mean, the rest of your life. I mean, that's like any discipline, but definitely for math. It's really slow. It's really hard. You have to specialize. You just have to. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't want to diss myself, but also the research mathematician guys, they're just different animals.
Right.
And I respect those guys, but they're just different. Oh, fuck!
No! Are you shitting me? Damn, we were actually getting to a good place. Oh, hello? Can we continue?
Let's just keep going.
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Wait, let me see where we left off, and then... Fuck.
No playback.
Here, I'll just hit record, and then we'll just say sorry we cut off there, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the question?
I think you were talking about how whether you would go more computer science or math with your PhD, and you were saying how.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You just have to specialize in math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got it. All right. All right. All right.
Sorry, folks. We cut off there for a second. We're still working through our bugs, but here we are, back again.
Yeah. All right.
So, computer science or math, which PhD are you going for?
Yeah. So as I was saying, both. And the other thing too, I don't think this is actually a bad answer. I think this is going to be the future. Even with a lot of mathematicians that are like older than me, like a guy like I think a good example is like Benoit Mandelbrot.
Right.
Any mathematician probably knows who that is. He's like the fractal guy. And he's made tons of contributions. But one of his things was that he would use computers to visualize stuff. So he would still work on like very theoretical problems, but he would try to turn it into a computational one. So
Right.
I think, if you want to be a mathematician nowadays, I don't think it's enough to just be able to do math.
Right.
I think you have to be able to interface with computers, or you're just going to miss out on the most interesting questions. And I know some people are like, well, I mean, now all this ML and deep learning stuff is like bleeding it over into math, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now people are like spoiling the purity of math for, something that's really just about like money or like just
Right.
getting grants, right? So I get that criticism, but at the same time, I mean, I'm not even condoning that. I'm just saying just using computers in general.
Right.
You can use computers for geometry or
Right.
topology. Like there's a million different ways you can be using this computationally. And also, I mean, if we're being real, there's not that many professorships. You're probably not going to be staying in academia. You're probably going to go work for a company.
If you're in topology or ML.
Well, just like if you're a mathematician nowadays, it's like you certainly can try to get a professorship, but
Right.
the thing is nowadays it's getting pushed later and later and later. It's like, do you really want to be 40 getting your first professorship? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like some people are willing to do that. Some people love it that much. But for me, I don't want to be a postdoc when I'm like 45.
Right.
But again, some people like research that much that they'd be willing to take lower pay to do that. But I don't think most people can do that or should do that. Or not should,
Right.
but just want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially past the age of like 30, when you're taking like a really low salary to be able to pursue a passion like that, the trade-offs just compound as you get to that kind of like starting a family sort of age and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's the thing is, it's, I haven't talked to a lot of professors about this, but the few that I have, they've said, PhDs are big marriage killers.
Right.
Like it's tough, man. You got to put a lot of work in. You got to balance a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a postdoc, you might not be teaching a lot, but you still have responsibilities, right?
Right.
And when you're not making a lot of money and you're not seeing your wife or your kids or anything, it's like that's tough. That's a tough situation.
Yeah, it's a tough sell for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those people are hardcore. I respect that. I respect it.
Definitely. Yeah, I was gonna ask, or I was gonna say a second ago when you were talking about kind of bringing computers and computational science more into the field of math these days. Like, I think you're right when you say math is like the most basic fundamentals of things. Like you can just get so abstract and theoretical. Like, you can find plenty of videos describing these outlandish mathematical theories about the limits of physics and stuff, and it's just like there is no real world application for some of that stuff. Like, it's just so beyond what we've been able to study in any other discipline of, like, science or anything.
Yeah, I think now, like, I think it's always the case that, like, the first iteration of math is always useless, right?
Right.
Like, 300 years ago. I don't know when complex numbers, like, really came around, but I think it's at least 300 years. Who really could have seen, like, the use of, a complex valued function or
Right.
number or whatever? But obviously it came back around. It's like, okay, actually, it works really well for quantum physics, right?
Right.
And we, that turned into the nuclear bomb.
Mm-hmm.
So, not saying that's a good thing, or I'm not saying anything about the
ethics.
yeah. But I am saying, like, in terms of actually building stuff, I think math always kind of comes around. It just takes time for people to understand it. I think even if you really ask the people who first create something, they don't even really understand it, right?
Right.
I'm not even talking about the applications. I'm just talking about the actual theory.
Right.
Because, you've been sitting with a problem so long, it's like Einstein's understanding of relativity might not even been as full as someone else who, one of his first readers.
Right.
And that's not to say anything about Einstein. It's just about the creative process, right? So,
Right.
yeah, I think stuff always comes back around, but it can take a long time.
Yeah, it can take a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because when you're dealing in pure math, like, you're not really necessarily thinking about a real world application to begin with.
No, you shouldn't be. It's not even. That's not the game of math.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the whole game of math. I guess there's really two views on this, right? So there's, like, the more, like, constructivist sense, and there's more, like, I'll call it the backward looking sense. So, like, old math used to be about backward looking stuff. So someone like, name any of your favorite Greek mathematicians. Those guys were backward looking. They didn't really have, like, a set of axioms that they were working from.
Mm-hmm.
They had some hunch, they had a good intuition, and then they went out, maybe they did an experiment, or they did, like, some back of the envelope calculations,
Right.
and they said, this is how this is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, like, the intuition. But then there's people like, I would say this is more popular in, like, the 20th century, someone like Bertrand Russell, who tried to, like, make axiomatize math, turn it into, like, a more formal, I mean, it obviously was moving into a formal, rigorous discipline anyway. It's the most rigorous discipline.
Right.
But he tried to make it even more rigorous. Like, he used, like, meta-logic, right?
Right.
So there's two schools of thought.
Right.
And I think, I don't know which one is, I don't even know if you can say better. Like, I don't think that's a
Right.
helpful way to think about it. I think it's useful to think about both. But, I mean, it's interesting to think about what are the base axioms? How do I combine theorems and work my way up from that? I think that helps when you are really abstract, right?
Right.
There is no intuition.
Right.
I don't know what a 500 dimensional space looks like.
Right.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
So I have no intuition about.
All you can rely on is a model at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and look, I'm not saying you can't build a little bit of intuition about that,
Right.
but it's dangerous. I mean,
Right.
like that's what I learned in undergrad, right? It's like your intuition can be a bad thing.
Right.
A very bad thing. So
that's interesting. Because then, like, in creative work, at least professionally, it's the exact opposite sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, intuition is everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, like, I think it's a mixture of both, right? Like, observing the best people that the professors here that I've seen, even the students too, they just kind of know, they just have a good nose for this stuff.
Right.
Like, it's not even, they couldn't even really tell you why they think something, but they tend to ask the right questions for whatever reason. I don't know, I think maybe it's just experience, but I don't think it's really any different from creative work. I think the only, like actual, like art, music.
Right.
I think it is creative work.
Right.
I mean, it really
well,
is.
Yeah, it obviously is,
Yeah.
since you're kind of bringing new ideas and new models to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a more rigorous kind of creative work. Like,
Exactly.
Talking with a friend of mine who's an engineer recently, we kind of came to this idea that's probably flawed, but we were saying, like, art, design, and engineering can kind of be seen as existing on the same spectrum, where art is one extreme, engineering is another. And as you move along that spectrum, you're just dealing with more and more hard constraints. Like an engineering problem, everything you do is defined by constraints, whereas art is almost a lack of fundamental constraints.
Well, actually, I don't even. I've been thinking the last couple of years, maybe even the opposite, right? Like I think sometimes the best art is the most constrained, right? Like what did Ben Jonson, like the really famous English poet, say, right? He was kind of like lamenting the sonnet, but he was also like praising it.
Right.
It's a very specific way of writing something. It's difficult, but actually a specific quote that I remember from Robert Frost or maybe someone like that was like, writing poetry without some constraints is like playing tennis without a net.
Right.
Sometimes giving yourself that constraint or inverting the problem, that's what gives you the creativity. Like having to choose a specific word from 5 or 6 or however many words. It's not all words, right? It's a subset. It's a very, very small subset of words.
Right.
I think that gives rise to, you got to discipline yourself. So
yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, like at least in filmmaking, I think a lot of the best directors are like the ones who are very good at disciplining themselves throughout their decision making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you don't, it's just gonna seem like kind of just this childish kind of subversion for the sake of subversion.
Right.
Like we've all seen. I don't know if we've all seen, but like we all know about like the fancy European art flick that like it's in black and white and there's no narrative and it's just shocking. Like there's just violence and sex. It's like okay, this doesn't speak to me in any capacity.
Right.
You have to. There's a craft to all of it.
Yeah. But then again, you can do something that's really shocking and artsy, but if you strike the right balance there, then it can work.
But you got to master the game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I remember in the Bible, right? Like the reason why Jesus was like spitting on the Pharisees, not literally, but like but like he was like, they had the cipher.
Yeah.
They were all huddled up around Jesus. And he was dropping bars on the Pharisees.
Exactly.
It's because he knew the scripture. He knew all of it.
Right.
And I'm not going to quote scripture here. But I know, I'm just saying.
It's not that kind of podcast.
Yeah, it's not that kind of podcast, guys. Actually, this is a Christian podcast.
Right,
this is
we'd like to tell you about Jehovah today,
But no,
he knew the game.
Yeah, you have to know the game. You have to respect the game.
Yeah.
Respect the difficulty of it, and know that it's gonna live on past you, and it's already lived like several lifetimes over you, and you're never gonna understand even a drop of it.
Right.
Because it's just complex. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, everything is.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. I had a question and it just disappeared.
Yeah.
How much of your process for solving a math problem comes from? Okay. Good talk. No.
Next question.
Yeah. How much of your process for solving a math problem do you think is kind of like just kind of sitting back and letting your brain noodle around on it for a while versus like really trying to like do step by step and like hammer it out on paper?
Yeah. So, this is one of my commandments. Like, there's no mind games in math.
Right.
Like, I don't know anybody. Like this is. I love the movie Good Will Hunting. It's one of my favorite movies. But I really hate that they have like the boy genius who's like. He like burns his proof in front of the professor, and the professor's like fumbling around, like dusting it off. He's like, "I could never do what you do, Will." It's like I'm like, dude, no. Not even close. It's like that guy has spent 40 years of his life building up his own process, writing stuff out, doing the hard work. There's no shortcuts, right? You can't just be a genius. Even the absolute geniuses, the top 1% guys. Mm-hmm. And Terrence Tao says this. You can go look on his blog. Like, use the waste paper basket often. The waste paper basket is your friend.
Right.
You gotta write stuff out. And we were talking about this yesterday, right? Like writing is the act of getting ideas. It's not about sitting back and like there's some like deity just like giving you ideas.
Right.
It's like
your brain is drinking from the fountain of the gods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you got to put the work in. It's hard work. And you have to, like, honestly, I'm not even kidding. A lot of the math is just, like, really ridiculously easy, like, algebra.
Right.
Like, but it's a lot of algebra. Like, imagine doing, like, you know, for some of these proofs, imagine doing, algebra and calculus, maybe a little bit of linear algebra.
Right.
But imagine doing that for, like, you know, 4 or 5 pages. It's like you can't make a mistake. If you make a mistake on one line, the whole thing is dead.
Right.
So it's just like, again, you know, you have to master the fundamentals, but you have to actually go out and do them.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing in, like, anything you do. Like, you have to just sit down and, like, scribble it out.
Yeah.
Like, quite literally scribble it out.
Or talk with other people. That's one thing that I've really done terrible at. I'm not the most articulate guy. You know, maybe like in conversation, but you know, that's kind of a different ballgame, right? I mean, like you have to actually communicate very abstract ideas. That's difficult. You know, for anybody. I mean, even the smartest people, we all think about stuff. We all process things in different ways. But collaboration is probably, honestly, the number one skill. There's no lone wolf mathematician that's like, there's no Will Hunting that's like sitting in his room reading a book, just soaking in the knowledge and like getting a Fields Medal.
And then he's like, oh, I suddenly know how to solve this unsolvable equation.
Yeah. There's no Archimedes stuff. There's no like sitting in the bathtub just like, oh my God, like I just solved quantum gravity. Like
an angel gave me a flash of the solution, right?
It's more like I work on this problem for like 8 years and I almost like give up on it because I'm so demoralized after making no progress on it. And then someone's like, wait, actually, have you thought about this? And you're like, oh, wait. Yeah, and then you just change like a couple lines of your proof and then you're like, oh, done.
There it is.
And that's it. You know, at least that's my experience. Like maybe, you know, more experienced people might have a different opinion. I mean, again, I'm just starting out, so.
Dude, I have a hunch, and I'm not an experienced enough writer to say whether it's true or not, but I do think, based on interviews and things I've read, that as you kind of get more experienced, sometimes more feedback can be worse in some cases.
I don't know. I mean, I can't really speak to that, you know. I think at my stage, I want all the feedback I can get. I want to I kind of want to get destroyed. Like, I want somebody to, like, end my, like, just rip my paper up.
Right.
And just be like, this is, I mean, obviously I don't want them to be, like, mean about it. I don't want to like, quit because someone just destroyed.
I'm going to take my ball and go home.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't want to do that. But, I think it's good to get your ass handed to you.
Right.
Like, it's not fun. I mean, it's like the same thing as a kid. It's not fun to get, you know, detention or put in time. Like, and there's limits, right? I mean, but you got to get feedback. Like, the number one thing is just, can you get a lot of feedback?
Right.
And even then, for the you got to get out of your mind.
Yeah,
you have
that's
to get
true.
out of your mind. You can't.
That's true.
Yeah.
Cause like, I think with screenwriting for me, I've noticed that, you know, like you might find an idea or like the core of a script when you have that first idea and you start developing it. It's like, it might be a really interesting idea to you in the moment because it's your idea, and maybe there's a little bit of like kind of jerking yourself off about it.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it's your thing.
Yeah.
And then you shop it to people and you talk about that idea and they just like don't find it interesting at all.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, damn, I should probably find a different maze to get lost in now.
Exactly. The thing is, at this stage, you know,
right.
We're relatively young guys.
Exactly.
But I think there's two kinds of errors you can make, right? And I think the error that we are more prone to making is like the navel gazing kind of.
Right.
You know, like you're like, oh, like I'm actually kind of surprised I have like any idea at all.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Like
it's like you're just psyched to have a idea.
Yeah.
About something.
But it's probably gonna suck.
Right.
But even then, I've also been thinking about this a lot too. It's like, we've talked about this. What's the value of an idea? Nothing.
Absolutely.
Nothing. So you got to take the idea, you got to take the inclination, you got to run with it. But that's where the feedback comes in for us, right? molding the idea, not just throwing it in the trash as soon as someone says anything negative about it.
Right, yeah, because it might be, a certain bit of feedback might kill the idea, or it might just be like, okay, well, if I change the angle of it a little bit, then suddenly it's 10 times better, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the amateur aspect is really with everything, not just your own work, but everything, to be like, oh, this idea has flaws, therefore we should throw it out.
Right.
You know, it's like in a lot of math, like a lot of the math is simplified by like probability. Like if I say something is normally distributed, that makes the math a lot easier. And it's like, yeah, of course, like this is probably not like independence, like is that a good assumption in data for most real life data? No. It's a terrible assumption, but it makes the math a lot easier. And it's like we have to make some progress. Like we can't just be like, oh, this is wrong, therefore I'm just gonna like do nothing with it and just stop doing math entirely.
Right. Yeah, and I think anything, you know, you can kind of give yourself some of those basic crutches to just like move it along.
Yeah, no, know? Like have the courage to be wrong.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
It's not a bad thing to be wrong. Like if you're doing anything at all,
if you're already doing okay.
Yeah, if you're doing anything, you're making that's more than most people are doing.
Right.
Most people make no progress on like deep progress on like creative work or you know math or whatever it is. But yeah.
Yeah, dude. How difficult is it for you to kind of get into flow state, as the people say these days?
Yeah.
With a problem set.
Yeah. It really depends, right? I and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. It's like, you know, math versus like CS.
Right.
So a lot of my problem sets, some of them are just totally about coding. Some of them are just about, you know, doing math.
Right.
I'm not the smartest guy, but you know the thing is like I you know I don't know how principled a lot of my approach is. That's something I've been trying to work on. But I think the number one thing for me is just, does it strike the interest in you?
Right.
You know, are the questions engaging? Are they challenging you to? Are they letting you think about stuff in a different way? Like the question is the key. It's not the answer. It's the question. So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's good practice, but at the same time, you know, going back to what I said at the very beginning, research versus classes, right? There's a different thing. So the professor's giving you problem sets, but in research, the only thing that matters is the question.
Right.
That's it. The answers are usually trivial, in my opinion. Like the answers that I read, it's like, again, everything is calculus and linear algebra.
Right.
The whole world is calculus and linear algebra. Like,
it's all calculus and linear algebra.
Always has been. It's really something that like an advanced undergraduate could probably do, and they do. Like they do.
Right.
They do. But anyway, but it's a whole nother ballgame to be like, some guy in 1980 has probably already done what I've thought about today. Like I'm like, oh my god, this is genius, and then some guy did it like, or girl did it like, you know, 70 years ago or something.
Right.
So.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because that's the other aspect, like to make it make it explicit.
Right.
It not only has to be an interesting question, it has to be unique.
Well, I think the thing with research as well, going back to the fact of the emphasis is on the question, not the answer. Like, you know, with academic research in general, you know, to answer any question, it's like there has to be like 50 papers on one thing before the community kind of decides, okay, this is true.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like there has to be a consensus. There also has to be, I think there's also some like, I don't want to say inevitability. But I will say, I think it's more like, I'll call it, I think maybe a good analogy is like art with a deadline.
Right.
Like math is art with a deadline. Like somebody's gonna write the Mona Lisa.
Right.
Somebody's gonna write the Mona Lisa. Like you hope that it's you.
Right.
So I have to work as fast as I can, especially in ML. Like ML is like, I mean, we've all seen how fast this thing has gone, right? Like in 10 years, it's basically taken over the earth. Not literally. I mean, not like Terminator stuff, but.
I mean, it's like every conversation I have with a programmer or someone in tech now is either blockchain or ML.
Everybody's
Yeah.
a data scientist.
Yeah,
nowadays.
yeah, exactly.
You can be like if you're like an
Right.
economist, you're like, oh, actually, no, I'm a data scientist. Give me $300,000 to do my models.
Dude, I remember back when we were in launch in Chapel Hill, like that summer, it felt like that was kind of the wave of ML, and that was 2019. And I thought, okay, that was hot for a minute. It's typical Valley VC stuff, a buzzword gets hot and then it gets cold. But it's just kept on growing and picking up pace since 2019.
I mean, the thing is, like, statistical learning theory is really old, man.
Right.
And I think, the thing is, a lot of this stuff just didn't have the compute to really work. But the ideas existed. I mean, the perceptron, all these things. Like, this is stuff discovered in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
These ideas have been around for a long time. There's a very rich literature. I think the only difference nowadays is the compute and the productization.
Right.
So it's actually being used for interesting stuff, right? I mean,
Right.
Tesla and any company,
Right.
they're all using it. So
Right.
it's in the public conscience. It's been good for funding, but also the hype has not been. Hype is not good for research. You don't want to get. There's a reason why the ivory tower is a tower.
Right.
It's because you don't want people influencing like what you should be studying, because
Right.
that might not be the truth.
Right.
It might not be, but
Yeah, as I get older, I just hate hype around like anything, really. Yeah. It's just annoying because it conflates things, it obfuscates what's real or what's important.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, exactly. It's fundamentally distortion, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Nothing is really like, I know this is gonna sound, I don't know, maybe cynical, but nothing is really that good.
Right.
Like also on the flip side, nothing is really that great or
Right.
bad either. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Like nothing is really great or terrible. It's just kind of
Right.
like it is what it is.
Yeah.
However you use it is what it is.
Yeah.
So.
And then something might become hot for a minute, and then tons of money gets poured into it.
Yeah.
Some of that money is well spent.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
It's all kind of a crapshoot, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing. Any idea is a crapshoot. I don't know how far this stuff is going to go. I mean, I don't think deep learning is the answer. I even hesitate to call it AI. Like, I really kind of hate it when people say, like, this is artificial intelligence. Like, what is intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
It's not this to me. Like,
yeah.
Like, I think I just call it, like, fancy modeling. Like, it's really fancy modeling that works well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too many steps far removed from something like regression, Like,
well, no, I mean, literally, it is regression. Like, actually, it's used for regression tests. Like, it literally is regression. So
Yeah, I was thinking linear regression.
Yeah,
which
I
is
know what you meant.
an extremely simple system of modeling.
Least squares regression is what most people think about. Like, what is it? ATA equals. Anyway,
but it's very basic.
Yes.
Fundamentally.
The idea behind it is really not that crazy. It's just I have a bunch of points. I want to draw a line through them.
Right.
I mean, that's the regression problem. I mean, obviously there's generative and discriminative models. So there's some stuff that's like actually modeling the probability distribution of some piece of data and then sampling off of it. So like it gets more complicated. Like I don't want to say like it's easy. It's definitely not easy, but it is kind of simple.
Would you say sparse coding is more complex than ML?
No. Sparse coding and ML are we're using tools of machine learning to solve sparse coding problems.
Interesting.
Also, I didn't even really talk about this, but like that's not the only thing I'm doing. I'm also doing a little bit of like reinforcement learning stuff, and that's less like. So I think the way people think about like a lot of machine learning and like deep learning is, classifying a cat or a dog or something like that, right? Reinforcement learning is more about like control. So a car or a robot or something like that. I do a little bit of stuff with that. But actually, another thing that I think is really interesting to talk about that I don't think gets enough hype, but should get a lot more hype. I'm taking a class right now on differential privacy, and so differential privacy is like a very Harvard thing. The people here are the creators of it. So, one of the I mean, there's a lot of people working on this stuff, but I would say one of the leaders is Cynthia Dwork, back in 2006, kind of came up with a definition of this like privacy budget. So if I have a data set, um, people want to interact with that data set, right? So maybe I want to share that. Like researchers want to share data. Public institutions, like, I don't know. Not the census, because that's actually illegal.
Right.
I mean, not really, but like, what is illegal is that you can't release information that would identify an individual specifically.
Okay.
So that's what's illegal. The census is actually used for a lot of stuff.
Right.
Obviously, it's used for, how many representatives do you get? It's used for public funding. There's a billion different uses for the census data.
Like Big Brother watching you at all.
Well, no, and this is the thing, is like it's trying to not, it's not allowing you to look at a single row of that data.
Right.
So the fundamental idea behind differential privacy is the idea of this privacy budget, which is how much noise can I add to data, such that I can balance the trade-off between being able to identify an individual and actually the utility of that data, right? So if I just add a ton of noise to some data set, that's going to destroy the utility of it. It's going to introduce bias. It's going to make, that's intuitive. But also, I mean, it's a terrible thing if there are, medical data sets or something, someone could have their insurance premiums raised if, some insurance company knew you had a condition.
Right.
And that's illegal here, but, but people can do that. Like, it's something people can do, maybe in other countries.
And, there's always bad actors in any industry who want to do it anyway, regardless of the law.
No, exactly. So it's like, what's the saying? Like, fences make for good neighbors or honest neighbors or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the saying. I'm not a.
Well, I don't either. Fences make friendly neighbors or something like that.
But like the idea is like, just don't give people the opportunity to be dishonest.
Right.
And there's no problem.
Exactly.
So it's a really cool idea. It's being used, and actually I mentioned the census. It's actually being used in the census now. So in the 2020 census, differential privacy was used to release data for the first time.
Right.
The people here were consultants. Obviously they're the creators. So it's a really cool time. It's a cool thing to see.
That's cool. Do you see that having farther reaching applications, like with, say, digital advertising and sort of the controversial aspects of Facebook?
Yeah, this is a good question. We've been talking a lot about this. In the early days of Facebook, targeted, so obviously you can do targeted ads on Facebook, right?
Right.
In the early days of Facebook, you could be so granular about targeted ads that it was really easy to know, I could have, so let's say you have like 100 dimensions about who you are, you have brown hair, you buy Ray-Ban sunglasses, and all that stuff. Like, okay, so if I have like 100 dimensions about you, I can probably identify you uniquely.
Right.
So if I have all those attributes about you, and then I send an ad, and someone matching your profile clicks on that, well, then I know exactly what you're. And it's not even just about the ad. I can infer a bunch of things about who you interact with, your friends, all this stuff. I mean, like people have, like in the early days, you could do like adversarial stuff. You could figure out someone's sexuality. You could figure out who they had relationships with, all this other stuff, even if it wasn't something that they were being publicly, outed with. Mm-hmm. So it's, but again, do advertisers want to spend a lot of money for noisy data? It's like, it does destroy the utility of it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess it can be much harder to target as well. Cause like, I think some people get confused when I have conversations with them about Facebook and data privacy, and some people seem to think that by selling data, they're literally like selling a packaged data set to a corporation.
Yeah.
And it's not that. It's
Yeah.
it's just targeted advertising ultimately.
Yeah. No.
So it's through a stained glass window in a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember when I first ran my like first couple of Facebook campaigns through their advertising platform. You could literally target like, I want people who live on this street in this town to see it. Like it was insane how specific you could get.
It's a little creepy, but I mean, to their credit, it has gotten better. I mean,
it has.
I know Facebook, they're not the most popular company, but it's a tough question, right? I mean, and the problem is there's such a high demand for it. Like everybody's like it's so granular, right? It's so it's such useful data.
Yeah, like it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to regulate that stuff at a meaningful level.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
It's difficult.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of more recent reports about Facebook specifically, though, and how there's a ton of fraudulent data now. Like, there's just a lot of noise from bots and such.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is not a Facebook-specific thing, right? It's like, how many people on the internet are even real? It's like, this is everywhere. It's difficult. I can't really speak a whole lot about this. This is not really my domain.
Right.
But it is disappointing. I feel like the internet is just kind of, it's getting overrun by ads. It's getting to be less usable. Like you said, there's just a lot of noise out there.
Right.
A very, very little signal.
Yeah, there's so much white noise.
Yeah.
Like I've been noticing Google is getting worse as a search engine.
No, a lot of people have. Yeah. If you go on Hacker News any day, there's probably some link saying Google is awful now. It's is it unusable? I mean, no,
it's still usable.
It's still one of the better search engines, right? I mean, I'm not going to go over to Bing now.
Right, yeah. I'm not going to stop using Google anytime soon. It's just like, I do feel like it was much sharper. It was a much sharper experience a couple of years ago.
Yeah. No, it's a hard thing to balance. And, I mean, people have been writing about this for 10 years.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Anytime you bring advertising into it,
yeah,
the incentives are going to be misaligned in some sense.
Right. Yeah, I kind of leaned away from advertising in my work actually because of that. It's just like it's so much noise, so many wasted dollars on the client side, and then it's just like you're screaming into the void a lot of times. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, advertising is I don't want to say anything terrible about it, but it's a rough business.
I think it's much rougher because of the internet.
Yeah. It's a dog world.
Yeah.
It's a dog world.
It's intense. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, like I think everything's really competitive nowadays, but I think the thing about advertising is it's just so it's very personal, right? Like nowadays it's very personal. It evokes very visceral responses from people.
Yeah, well, it's like, anytime you want to seek out any information now, you're hit with at least 20 ads in the process. Yeah. So it's like, whereas it used to be like you flip through half a magazine on the train and you see like 6 pages of ads.
Yeah.
And maybe they're even gorgeous or something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's totally true.
But yeah, it's really tragic.
Yeah, I have very strong opinions about advertising that I'll keep off air.
Right. Same. Yeah.
But
we'll keep it civil.
Yeah.
But yeah, all I would say is that organic content and really like building an interactive audience seems like much healthier for companies nowadays than advertising.
Yeah. No, I think word of mouth is always the most powerful thing, right?
Right.
Even if it's crappy information.
Yeah.
Like I hate to say it, like, we all have an uncle, like, I don't know, maybe he's kind of a weird uncle, but, like, sometimes you say stuff, like, you're like, you know what, my uncle's a weird guy, but he's kind of right about some of this stuff, like...
You know what, he's got a point.
The human element of anything is very powerful, regardless of who it's coming from.
Facts.
It's just way more visceral than clicking around on a screen.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think people are more starved for it now. So it means a lot more.
Everybody's living alone.
Yeah.
Everybody's on their computer 8 or 9 hours a day.
Right.
We really crave working with other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I love meetings now. Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's not get too crazy, but at the same time, like, I don't know, it's nice to kind of get out of your head for a bit and like talk to someone and like really exchange ideas in that rapid fire conversational kind of way.
Yeah, no, it's almost like humans are social animals.
Almost.
It's almost like this is how we've operated for the last, like, several 100,000 years or whatever.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory, but the research isn't in on that.
Yeah, I don't want to say like I know what I'm talking about,
Right.
but I have an inkling that people
Yeah.
need to be around other people. I just don't think
Exactly.
it's good to be in social isolation for 2 years.
Right. Right. I don't know what prompted you to say that,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I agree. How do you think academia has changed post-COVID? Has it changed at all?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, the thing is with academia, it's always a little bit kind of the same.
Right.
I mean, really wouldn't even say it's changed that much in the last, like, 200 years.
Right.
I mean, it's still the same kind of model. I mean, there are some programs that don't use, like, the apprenticeship model, but I think that's what works in math, right?
Right.
That hasn't changed. I think, if anything, for me, it's just made me even more grateful for what I had 4 or 5 years ago when, like, I was just starting out math, and
Right.
even 2 or 3 years ago before COVID. There's nothing like getting up on the whiteboard, on the chalkboard, and just writing stuff out.
Right.
There's nothing like it. Zoom can't even remotely compete with that.
Right.
It's not even close.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's something to just like 2 or 3 people in a room with a whiteboard,
Yeah,
Like,
it's not just math. It's everything.
yeah.
It's everything.
There's just a physicality to the way all of you are interacting. Maybe one person throws something up on the board, then another person adds to it. Like, whether it's math or literally anything else. I mean, there's few times I feel more productive in terms of, like, working out a problem.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, it's like, in math especially, it's very important. Like, you can throw up words on, like, lecture slides for a lot of stuff, I think,
Right.
and you can do it relatively effectively.
Right.
But for math, it's too fast. It's way too fast. I can't digest. You got to leave a lot of white space on a slide for me to be able to actually understand what you're saying on a slide.
Right.
Because, what's the rule, right? Like a minute per slide.
Yeah, something like that.
I can't do that. Nobody can do that. Even the really
Right.
smart people. And the other thing too is if you get nervous, like you start rushing through slides. It's like, well,
Right.
after 40 minutes, I've completely lost the audience.
Right.
But if I'm on the whiteboard, I have to go slow. So it kind of
it's like you are working it out in real time
exactly
with the people. Yeah.
With the people. That's the
Yeah.
key word. That's a great way to put it. It's like
Yeah.
I'm working with you, or we're kind of obviously we're not doing it together because I've thought about this.
Right.
But no, I will take a whiteboard like lecture any day over anything else.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I mean, academia is probably going to be changing in other ways. The other thing too is like Harvard. It's kind of its own little place.
Right.
Harvard doesn't have to change if it doesn't want to, right? When you got $50 billion in the bank, you can kind of do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, you guys are doing okay. I'll give them props.
Yeah.
They're doing all right.
It's not terrible. I mean,
Right.
no, I mean Harvard is basically a hedge fund with a university attached to it.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Now MIT, those guys are struggling. They only have 25 billion. It's rough over there. It's rough times.
Yeah,
at
it's
MIT.
really, really impoverished over there.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's like going to like Dresden in World War II. It's just
Right,
like a
yeah.
wasteland.
Yeah.
There's just nothing there. There's no plumbing.
Nothing works.
I will say though, the janitors over at MIT are geniuses. Some of those guys.
Yeah, like that one guy. I think his name was Will or something.
Yeah, no, they do some really great work on the boards.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, they got to keep the talent coming in.
Exactly.
But it's tough. I mean, how are you going to recruit people with that kind of money?
Right.
You can't. you got to have big money. You got to have 50 billion. You can't have 25.
Yeah, nothing less than 30, honestly. But yeah, I mean that's an interesting point though, to be honest, because you do get the privilege of doing research at the Harvard University.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
pretty surreal.
No, it really is, man. It's crazy. Like I don't think anybody here. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but like a lot of the people I talk to, it's like I don't even really kind of believe that I'm here.
Right.
Like it doesn't even seem.
Do you feel like the people you talk to share that feeling, or is it more just like you're kind of wigging out over here, like why is no one thinking?
No.
this is
I definitely talked to other people explicitly about this.
Right.
And sure, look, like there are definitely some people here that like I'm sure. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not privileged, but like they've also just kind of always grown up in that privilege, and
Right.
they don't even really think about it. It's just like, oh, like mom and dad went to Harvard, I'm going to Harvard. It's like,
Right.
you know, obviously that was not the case for me.
Right.
But no, even the people that are like, you know, in the same boat like for privilege as me, it's crazy, right?
Right.
I think for anybody it's crazy. It's a little weird.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy just walking around here, because it's like it almost doesn't hit you until after the fact. It's like, oh, like this is the university.
Yeah.
You know.
And the whole concept of like an elite place where like
Yeah.
people's kids come and like gather and like network and play together and hang
Right.
out. Like
Yeah,
it's
no,
weird. It's
it
weird.
is weird, because we were talking about the business school and how like there's a lot of I wouldn't accuse Harvard of nepotism. I mean,
No,
I'm
I
sure
would.
any
I
Ivy
would.
League.
I definitely would.
I don't want to single them out as what I'm
Oh,
saying.
no, yeah, I got you.
But yeah, it's like there's a lot of people who come here, and it's just kind of like their expectation growing up was, oh yeah, I'll go to Harvard, get my MBA, go work at whatever company.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's but it's interesting because it does become sort of a playground for the wealthy.
Oh no,
Yeah.
and I will say like I love this place, but it also does that aspect of it is not something that I enjoy.
Really.
Like it feels a little gross
Really.
when everybody's like, it's like, dude, everybody here is so rich.
Really?
Everybody here has so much fun. It's like, yeah, like there's a lot of suffering in the world.
Right.
Like I don't want to say like oh poor me, like I'm
Right.
like oh I'm feeling so guilty, like
Yeah.
everybody like shower your affection for how guilty I am.
Right.
But it does feel kind of like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we can all experience that at some point in some way. Like you're just in a conversation about something, and it's like, wow, like the lack of awareness here or whatever it is just feels odd to me.
Exactly. You gotta.
Yeah.
I think the way that I've kind of like, and that was earlier on. Like I don't feel that way a lot now. I think now. Well, even then in the early stages when I just got here, and
Right.
you know, like the novelty's still there.
Right.
But like my main thing is like to me, it's a responsibility, and I'm really glad to have more responsibility.
Right.
Like give me as much responsibility as I can take on,
Right.
because that's where the growth comes from, as a person, but also as
Yeah.
like in your career.
Yeah, no, like just having to hold yourself accountable to a certain standard, and like when your environment forces you to do that, you know, that's when you really grow. Yeah.
Exactly. It's It feels like the prestige is nice, but really it's not. Like I don't think that's what sustains you for anything. Like it's just you just can't work that way. You're gonna burn out. The money's never gonna be enough. The you know, if I'm not going to Harvard, it's like, you know, oh, I want to go to Princeton instead. It's you know,
Right.
like there's always somewhere, like there's always something better. Like that's kind of what drives you here in the first place, right?
Right.
Like nobody here is really that satisfied with their lives.
Right.
Like, nobody.
I mean, I don't think anybody is, you know. Yeah.
Well, I don't know, man. Some people just want to eat a pizza on a Friday and like watch a movie. Like I
Right.
respect that.
That's true. Yeah.
Like I mean, like we all want to do that sometimes. Like some people, that's like all they want to do.
Right.
That is not the people here.
Yeah.
The people here want to like take over the world.
Right. For better or for worse.
Yeah. No, exactly. But that's the thing, is that they actually have a chance to do it. It's like
Right.
you gotta prepare yourself for that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's like now that you're here, that's actually in the cards. Like you have the option to take over a company or you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you have to like again, you have to kind of hold yourself accountable and be a responsible person with it. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to. Other people are going to rely on you and look up to you. I mean, I think people already do. I think people in my family already kind of do that more than I'm comfortable with.
Right.
But I mean, again, like that's the whole point. Like
Yeah.
the whole point of being good at something is so that other people can come to you, and so younger generations in the future can learn from you
Right.
and do the same thing that people are doing for me now.
Yeah, it's like I think ultimately it's like, at least with my work, the way I think about it is like I would like to do something at a certain scale and with a certain discipline and rigor that I can like really move the ball forward. In a way that someone else can move it even farther.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? I mean, humanity is not... I think, for me, kind of the healthy perspective is like looking at yourself at Harvard as like part of a big organism. So,
Right.
I mean, it's a big school. Like, there's a lot of different stuff happening here, but just kind of... it's really hard because, like, I think a lot of people get into math with the Goodwill Hunting idea.
Right.
But it's like you got part of that is just humbling yourself and be like, okay, actually, I'm a really small part of a really big picture.
Right.
And, we're all like none of us are really like big and like most people are not big enough to make like a huge
Right.
difference.
Right.
But what you do matters.
You try.
Yeah.
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 All you can do is try.
You put your stuff out there, and all you can hope for is like, influencing the people around you and being a good positive effect, having a positive effect through your work on the people around you.
Yeah, exactly.
But that doesn't mean 100,000 people are going to read my thesis.
Right.
I'll be lucky.
Never know.
No. You'll be lucky if like 2 people read it. And,
Right.
and that's real statistics. You can look that up. It's like
Wow.
like 90% of work. I don't know if it's 90%. It's really high though. It's way over 3/4.
Right.
Gets only cited by the authors themselves.
Dude, I had to request a thesis recently from some professor in the Netherlands, I think.
Yeah.
It was like some really esoteric essay on Ivan's Childhood, which is like a Soviet film.
Yeah.
But I was like thinking about that. I was like, damn, like that is so weirdly specific. Like, I wonder how many other people have emailed this person to say, hey, can I get this?
No, you're the first.
Yeah.
That guy was probably,
Right.
you made that guy's day.
Right. Yeah, no, he seemed like super psyched. I was like, damn, cool.
Especially for the film stuff. Like,
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
want to be like rude.
Right.
But the thing is, like, it's really hard to build off of other stuff in those areas because it's like human nature does not change that much.
Exactly.
Obviously, film has changed, but it's not like it's not changing at the rate that math or ML or just STEM in general changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with film and photography that I've always found kind of interesting is like they don't really move forward in a formal academic sense,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the arts in general, that's kind of the case, but I do think there's more academic attention given to writing and things of that nature, like more classical disciplines.
Yeah.
Even painting a little bit. But yeah, photography and film are very new, they're very modern, so I always kind of wonder, like, will they become more of an academic field of study over time? Like, does that just take 200 years? Or, like, is it just the nature of the medium that it doesn't lend itself to that?
It's tough to tell. I mean, I would say for a lot of that art, for a lot of art, it's like, yes, we should be studying it. I think there's a lot of value to those disciplines. I always hate when people are like, oh, like, cut it all out of school. It's like, no, like, we need these kind of people working on these kind of problems.
Right.
It's important, but it's also like, do they need to be, a 20, 50, 100 person department?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably not.
Right.
Probably not. For better, for worse. I mean, it sucks to take away funding, but it's also like, where are the gains coming from?
Right. Yeah, and it feels like, especially with film, just because it's so expensive, like, the conversation really happens, like, out in the world a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is you want to be touching people. Like, you got to meet people where they're at, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the people who are in the theaters, they're not reading the papers. They're watching the movies.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have to be a pretty deep lover or a maker of films to read the papers. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, I mean, if I had to choose between reading a paper and just going out on the subway and just watching people for like 2 hours,
Right.
like I think I know what I would choose.
Right. Yeah. 99 times out of 100. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. How far into this are we?
I've not been keeping track, but I see that we did not plug in the laptop, so the battery's going down. Yeah, we
is there a timer on the camera?
Oh. Yeah. 633 minutes. No, it does say 633 minutes, but
That means we've been going. The camera's been recording for about 30 minutes.
No, we've been in here for several days. We haven't eaten in several days.
We actually talked for 72 hours, and we only gave you the best hour.
Yeah, sadly enough, this is the highlights of what we came up with.
Yeah, we're just really boring.
We have nothing interesting to say.
Right.
It's tragic, but it does happen to the best of us.
Yeah.
And the worst of us.
Right.
But it happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
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 Should we call it? I mean, I can
No,
keep going
let's go another 3 or 4 hours.
No, but in all seriousness, I can keep going if you want.
Yeah, no. Let's go to the battery dies down.
Okay.
Let's see when it gives me a warning.
Okay, that's fair.
But I mean, the thing is, like, I've been spitting game.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you are also a world-class producer.
Yeah.
Of beats.
Yeah, no. So Kanye and I have been working together for. It's been 15 or 20 years now. I started making beats when I was 3.
Yeah.
No, 2. I was 2.
Yeah, I think you got your first Grammy when you were 6.
I
right?
was in the hospital, and I got the call. I was in one of those like the newborn wings, and they said, John. They gave me the phone and they said, John, you got the Grammy, and I said nothing because I wasn't able to speak.
Yeah.
But
his dexterity from a young age was crazy. He was on the MPC straight out the womb.
It was pretty wild. I actually used in a Akai when I was a child, but because it was so small.
Right. That
the
makes
Mini, the
sense,
Akai
yeah.
Mini.
Yeah.
That's what I was jamming out on.
Yeah.
But it's a great question, Eric. I got my first record deal when I was 4, signed to Rock.
Nice.
Signed to the Rock.
As we all do.
Yeah. A lot of us are signed to the Rock.
Yeah.
I mean, my circle is famous. I mean, you can't really talk to me. Honestly, it's kind of a privilege for you guys to be hearing
his voice.
me. Because I'm just always in the studio. I'm always working.
Yeah. Yeah, math is more of a hobby.
Exactly.
A Harvard PhD for you is really more just like a casual, you were bored.
Exactly. You kind of put it on the back of the stove and just let the water kind of boil off into the, you wait. I just do this stuff, a couple hours a week. I'll write a paper. I'll get a couple Fields medals here and there.
Okay, but back to serious.
In all seriousness, I will say this is actually an interesting point that I think should be said.
What?
Okay. Maybe I don't want to be offensive.
Okay.
But people have very specific skill sets.
Right.
Like the people in the engineering school, they're geniuses. The people that are mathematicians, they're geniuses, but also a lot of them have very little charisma.
Right.
They're not the funniest people.
Right.
They don't have a lot of this talent. It's like I know we joke about it, but it is like you do really kind of have to stay in your lane.
Right.
And maybe we're going out of our lane now. But
I mean, yeah, this podcast could be a train wreck. I've never done a podcast before.
No, it's a very specific skill.
Right.
And
even throughout this conversation, I've been sort of realizing I have a lot of blind spots in terms of interviewing a person.
Yeah, I think you've been doing a good job. You've definitely been leading the conversation. Again, this is my podcast. I just want to make that clear.
Hosted by Krehbiel.
Well, I mean, not really, but I mean, whatever you want to say.
Right. It's really to each his own.
Well, no, I mean, there's no ambiguity, but.
I'm just saying, my.
Well, I mean, you can just say anything. I mean, people can really talk about anything they want to, but that doesn't really make it true. I mean.
But it is true that my company is gonna put this podcast out into the world.
That's
so.
Well, it's true that it will be on a platform that you claim to be your own.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Next topic.
But yeah, I mean, with any discipline, you know, like, actually, for example, at the start of COVID, I downloaded some DAW, I can't remember which, and I tried to learn how to sample. And after, like, 3 days, I was starting to figure it out, but I kind of realized, like, damn, like, I'm going to have to give so much time to this to even get vaguely interesting results.
Yeah.
Like, fuck it. I'm just going to keep writing and working on film stuff.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. I mean, I've done the same.
Yeah.
You know, you chop it up, and actually, Logic can do that for you. Like, Logic can chop it up, but, you know, equalizing out the sounds in the background, getting the exact sound you want.
Right.
You also got to hear the sound. I mean, it's a whole thing. I mean, I really respect the guys who can just go into the studio, 15, 20 minutes like pros,
Right.
chop it up, cut it up. That's it. And then they put some words over it and they put it out. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it just takes, like, such an inherent understanding of, one, the technical stuff, which is the biggest first hurdle, and then, two, the creative side of it, of, like, really knowing how to put the sauce into a beat, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, yeah, like, and that's any discipline, you know, doing math or, like, anything else that you try to do.
Yeah.
You know, there's layers of different kinds of knowledge that all have to come together, and it just takes a lot of time.
Yeah, no, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of people.
Right.
You know, I mean, these guys, you know, I know we joke about, like, you know, all these guys being geniuses. Like Kanye is a genius, man, and he is. Yeah. But also, how many guys does he have around him that are also, in their own way, the absolute best at what they do?
Right.
And how many guys has he learned from that are the absolute best at what they do?
Right.
So, it's really just about respecting the whole game.
Yeah, the game as a whole.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, and, like, with Kanye specifically, you know, like, he deifies Jay Dilla and all those guys. And then he also gets Daft Punk on his songs.
Yeah.
So it's, like, such a diverse set of influences coming together, which makes for really interesting sounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
But...
Well, you're doing a great job. You're really keeping the silence from... You just keep asking.
Well, you know, the silence is important.
Silence is violence.
Yes.
All right, shall we call it a day?
No, I mean, actually, yeah, in a way, you know. Like, especially on a podcast, if things go quiet for a minute, it's like, oh, fuck.
It's unsettling.
Yeah,
it's very unsettling.
It's a little uncomfortable, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I feel like at some point, we are probably trying a little hard to be professional.
Oh, yeah, I mean, definitely, you know. Like, I'm not comfortable right
now. No,
yeah.
me neither. I mean, it takes some time to get comfortable in front of a camera and a mic. You gotta be a sociopath to be, like, yourself in front of a camera, in my opinion.
Right, especially on first go.
On first go, yeah. Maybe after, like, 20 years or something, it's like, okay, this is just second nature to me, but, first couple times,
right,
it's a different ball game.
It is. Dude, what do you think of influencers on that note of being on camera constantly?
It's, I respect people who can make money like that. Like I don't really respect exactly what they do, but also, like, that is a skill, right?
Right.
Like, is it a useful skill? No.
Is it a truly value-creating skill in and of itself?
I don't know. Like, I don't even know the names of a lot of these, like, really famous people. Like,
bro, if you don't follow Addison Rae, this conversation's over. That's all I'm saying.
Like, I've heard the name, but, like, if you show me a picture of him or her, I guess.
Her,
yeah, her.
Good guess.
50-50, or I guess,
Well, it's anyone's odds.
I take that back.
now.
Yeah, I don't know. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you really marginalized some people there,
John. No, I mean, like in all seriousness, I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on these people. It's so far removed from my experience that I can't really speak about it other than I could give you a basic take. I could be like,
Right.
oh, these people on Instagram, man, idiots.
They're
Like,
fake.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I could say that, and
Right.
and maybe it's true, but like, we're on a podcast, man. It's clear our mental health is not good.
We're already starting at
Yeah,
a bad
we're
point.
slipping. Like, we're if the moment you think you can start podcasting and making money, like that's not a good sign.
Bro, it's not about the money. It's about the hustle.
It's about the hustle and the
It's
grind.
about the hustle and the grind.
And
Hashtag Gary Vee.
The thing is that if you're not putting out content, your life is meaningless. You should just.
You don't even exist, bro.
You don't even
If you don't put out content, you don't
If
exist.
you're not on the internet 24/7,
Right.
if your whole life isn't documented, written out from start to finish, you
Dude,
mean nothing.
I will say, man, I think I might have an interesting thought on that concept. Because, you know, I work in media, so I'm already around this stuff a lot, and I want to get into filmmaking, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's interesting, man, because there's not really much value placed in the film industry on, like, are you a content creator? Do you have tons of Instagram followers? It's like, it's really just, like, understanding how an industry operates more than anything. Because it is an industry, and it's a very intense one. But I think a lot of people kind of get very drawn into this sort of void of YouTube and TikTok and whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like...
In a very bad, like, politicized, terrible way. Like, people get radicalized and all this stuff.
Well, yeah. And like, I think a lot of young people who are interested in media just kind of get sucked into, like, I need to create as much content as humanly possible as quickly as I can. And, you know, maybe that's good, but I do notice that you don't really end up inside any industry going that route. Like, you don't really have...
But that's the thing, right? It's like, that's
Yeah.
kind of the conflict nowadays is, like, young media versus
Right.
old media.
Yeah, and that's the other side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I don't really know a whole lot about the industry. I'm not in it. I don't really study it. I
Right.
really don't even, it's not good for me to think about it.
Right.
I should be staying away from this stuff as much as I can.
Right.
But, I don't know. I think it is kind of cool that anybody can just pick up a camera
Right.
and just do anything nowadays. I mean,
Right.
I think that's amazing. I don't know. I don't know where all this leads. I don't like where it's going. I think the world is.
Okay, boomer.
It's no, okay. Yeah, everything's fine. The world is
Everything's fine. Everything is perfect.
The world is fine. Nothing's happening. There's no wars. It's all peace. People are very happy.
Everybody is happy all the time.
It's just a great world to live in.
Yeah. No, but I mean I do think it's interesting because we really don't know where it leads. Like, how does that long-term confluence of industry versus independence kind of come together? Does it come together? Does one swallow the other? Who knows?
I think young media is definitely winning.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
I mean,
just on sheer attention and accessibility.
And this is actually like something I can't remember who said this, but it's like science wins because certain hypotheses or theorems win because the people who oppose them die out.
Right.
Right. So and this is kind of the same with anything really, but like just sit and wait. Like these people are gonna be gone. Old Hollywood's gonna be gone.
Right.
The young people are still gonna be there. There'll be new young people, and then those young people will overtake those old people that were the young people. Like, it's a cycle.
Yeah, no, it's a generational cycle for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, like, there's so much money to be had in this new media stuff
Right.
that old Hollywood is already kind of gone back to
Right.
or going to that model, right?
Right.
Like, you see the Wendy's commercials, you see like the meme. Here's the memer. It's like,
Right.
you know, like,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
not that Wendy's is like a film studio, but
well,
they should be.
I will say
They should be.
let's give fast food a little bit of credit because I do pay a lot of attention to what McDonald's does with their advertising, for example.
Yeah, I love small businesses. And
Right.
to watch McDonald's.
To watch Ronald McDonald rise,
to make
it's beautiful.
The five brothers, there are five brothers, the five guys.
Yeah.
They came over here in a ship. They came off the boat. They came
Straight from Italy.
Exactly.
Just to make cheeseburgers in your local neighborhood.
Yeah, and they
Whichever one of their 500 local neighborhoods that is.
they're living the American dream. They did it.
Right.
And
No, but I mean, I think with new media, you know, it's interesting, man, because like in Hollywood's case, for example, like Netflix shows were considered new media for a while, and there was a big union uproar about that
Yeah.
recently, and
Yeah.
that was a whole thing. So it's like, what even is new media anymore? Like streaming is not even considered in that bucket if we're talking legally speaking.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. But I mean, dude, Wendy's put out a hip hop album.
Did they?
They really did, and it's terrible. It's
Jamie,
not. It's,
Jamie, pull that
Jamie,
shit
pull
up.
it up.
Yeah.
Actually, no, we actually do have a team back here. Can you guys pull that up for us?
Yeah, we got like 20 people
We have
in here. You
No,
know.
stop. He's being hyperbolic. There's actually 3 people back there. We pay them 70 to 80 grand to cut up our content, edit it.
We're big balling over here.
It's a lot of money.
At Krehbiel, because this podcast is hosted by Krehbiel.
Well, I mean, this podcast is really. I don't have a name for it.
It's the Jon Huml experience.
Exactly. I am the brand. I am the experience.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should probably end on that note.
Yeah.
The battery's dying down. We're
Yeah,
kinda going off the
think,
rails.
I think the best note to end on is really Wendy's released a hip hop album, and we'll just let the viewers interpret that however they want.
Thank
Is
God.
society doomed? Possibly.
We've been doomed for a while, but it's all fun. This is all enjoyable, right? We can all laugh at it.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. I mean, I think society is in a constant free fall.
I think we live in a society.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is like when you really think about it, we do live in a society.
Exactly. Yeah.
On that note, let's maybe we'll cut it off. But
Yeah.
thanks for listening to my podcast, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Krehbiel podcast.